Okay, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about the elements of verbal and nonverbal communication. Let me start with body language. Body language is thought to account for between 50 and 70% of all communication. Generally speaking, if the verbal and the nonverbal message that is given do not align, the receiver will believe the nonverbal message. Nonverbal message is considered to be more reliable than the verbal communication. Some elements of nonverbal communication we're going to talk about next. The first one is space. So the distance between people play a large role in nonverbal communication. Saying something to someone when your face is a few inches away from their face sends a very different message than talking to them, while respecting personal boundaries. Personal space, of course, changes from person to person and is often influenced by culture. In the United States, maintaining a distance between 6 and 18 inches is generally appropriate for intimate relationships only. So, the space between a parent and their child, between boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, that kind of thing. Between 18 inches and 4 feet is appropriate for personal interactions. So if you're going to be, just talking to a colleague, talking to a professor, whatever, 18 inches to 4 feet is generally considered appropriate. Between 4 and 12 feet is generally considered appropriate for social interaction, and between 12 and 25 feet is appropriate for public distancing. Now, most Americans have a comfort level, a personal space comfort level, and that's usually around 4 feet. Like I say, it does vary from person to person, and it varies culturally as well. So be aware of that. The next thing we're going to talk about is the environment. The environment of where communication occurs. It's a part of nonverbal communication. For instance, a conversation between an instructor and a student can convey a very different meaning in the instructor's office behind a closed door as it does, say, the instructor and the student talking in a hallway around other students. So be aware that the environment where a conversation takes place. This kind of ties back a little bit to a couple of weeks ago when Megan was talking about the problem that the nursing staff was having with housekeeping and approached the manager in the parking lot. That environment is a much different environment than approaching the manager in the manager's office to talk about the situation. Eye contact. Eye contact can invite a feeling of connectedness as long as it doesn't last too long. People get really uncomfortable oftentimes when you just maintain eye contact with them for a long period of time. Likewise, breaking eye contact can indicate that communication is about to cease. See what I mean? You thought I was going to turn the video off, didn't you? Ha! Lack of eye contact can indicate disinterest, discomfort, or it may be read as an attempt to hide true feelings. It's interesting to note that, let's go back to that. An attempt to hide true feelings. Like if a person is trying to conceal something from somebody else, it's thought that they will not maintain eye contact because it's, there's the old adage that the eyes are the window to the soul. And it's very often true. You can tell how people are feeling by looking in their eyes and seeing how they're doing. That's part of emotional intelligence. Interesting to note that eye contact in our society, at least, is kind of disappearing more and more. And that is due to smart devices. So oftentimes people will have a conversation, you're carrying on a conversation, and one of the people, or maybe even both of the people, are looking at a smart device. So that eye contact may disappear entirely from our society. I apologize if you can hear the garbage truck coming outside. If you can't hear it, well, good for you. All right, posture can also play an important role in communication. If a person is sitting up straight, it is an indication that they're interested, that they're paying attention, that they care about what you have to say. Sitting with the body hunched forward can indicate boredom or indifference. Crossing one's arms across one's chest can suggest defensiveness or aggressiveness, especially in conjunction with, the eyes. Like you can tell right now that I'm very, very angry with you students. However, you have to be really careful when you interpret arms crossed. This is a really, really comfortable position for me to sit in normally. For instance, if I'm watching a lecture and I'm terribly interested in it, completely into it, I sit like this because this is the most comfortable way for me to sit. Probably because my big gut. Anyway, the next thing I want to talk about is it's something that I do sometimes. I'm doing it on purpose right now. But sometimes I do it, like earlier in the video, I noticed that I was doing this, and that is using gestures, hand gestures. Gestures don't just refer to hand gestures. Gestures can be a touch, like putting your hand on someone's shoulder or, on their back or whatever. And so a message delivered with appropriate gestures adds emphasis to the message, but too much gesturing can be distractive. I have an uncle who is an Italian, and he talks with his hands, everything. It seems like he can't even use his voice without having his hands involved in what he's saying. And it can be distracting. I kind of sometimes laugh at him in my head, and sometimes I laugh at him out loud because of his hand gestures that he uses so much for everything, to emphasize everything. You see, I'm doing that right there. Boom. But in some cultures, like in the Italian culture and the way he was raised, it's just a normal part of the communication process. You have to be careful with the gesture of touching someone. It can be misinterpreted as inappropriate and off limits, so that should be done carefully. Facial expression. Effective communication includes facial expression that agrees with the message. For instance, a big smile on your face while you tell a client that her child is dying of cancer is definitely incongruent with the message that you're sending. So I know that's kind of a macabre and out there example, but that's just an example of, how facial expression can disagree with the message that you're trying to send. All right. Next, I want to talk about, and lastly, I want to talk about vocal expression. Tone, volume, and inflection are an incredible part of nonverbal communication. The way something is said has a major influence on the message that is being said. For instance, try this with a beloved dog, and I'll show you an example of this in another video. In a very sweet and loving tone, tell them that you hate them and that you're going to drop them off at the pound to be locked into a cage for the rest of their life. But do it in a sweet tone. See how they react to you. They'll probably wag their tail and lick your face if you do it in a sweet tone, although the message that you're conveying is really not a very pleasant message that the dog would like to understand. Now, I know that dogs only have a very, very basic understanding of the language that you are speaking, so that may not be a great example, except that it is kind of a great example. Think of some of the people you'll be communicating with who may also have a very basic understanding of the language you're speaking. Somebody who basically doesn't speak the language you speak, and I assure you, you will run into that into your nursing career. So when you do that, make sure that you're using the right vocal expression, that what you're saying, what the message you're trying to convey agrees with the vocal expression that you're using. Thank you for joining me. Good day. How do you turn this off?